We carried out this new study on public sector adjustments, first to have an overview of what is happening in terms of public sector adjustments today, and also to identify very clearly what are the effects of these public sector adjustments all over Europe. The first conclusion of this study is that while most countries have implemented public sector reforms, the diversity in public sector adjustments is very important all over Europe. By diversity in magnitude, diversity in timing, in the nature of the adjustments, but also in the effects of these adjustments. And we can see that generally this diversity reflects the budgetary situation. Higher was the debt, and more important were public sector adjustments, like in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland as well. And countries that consolidated earlier, like Sweden, had less pressure to carry out adjustments. And we can see that those countries that did not have a proper review of the situation before having the adjustments, but also because of the method that was implemented, maybe without social dialogue, without proper consultation of social partners, of course the effects were quite different. But in general we can see quite devastating effects on pay and working conditions. The bulk of the adjustment has been on quantitative adjustments, employment and wage cuts. Wage cuts, for example, by 25% in 2 years' time in Romania, but also in Latvia and many other countries. So, of course, lower pay, lower employment, higher intensity at work, because you have less employees for doing the same work. And of course this has direct implications on the future quality of public services. There is no doubt that there is a need for structural adjustments and reforms in the public sector. And in fact many European countries had started even before the crisis. The problem is that within the crisis, because of this need to reduce the debt, we have reduced many public expenditure, and we have concentrated only on wage and employment cuts. And this, of course, is leading to a different type of reforms in the public sector, which can be counterproductive, in fact, in terms of better quality of services in the public sector, but also, generally speaking, about pay and working conditions in the public sector. And what I want to say is that traditionally, the public sector is seen as a sort of model employer. And we can see that within a few years' time, the public sector has been converging in terms of pay and conditions to those prevailing in the private sector. So you can see that here, the privileged status of public sector employees has been rapidly disappearing. Wages have been cut, but not only basic wages, but all bonuses that were given to public sector employees before. 13 months, 14 months, they have been cut in Hungary, in Romania, in many countries, but also Christmas bonuses in Germany, and also a certain number of non-monetary benefits. So this is one thing that has been affecting employees in the first place. And then, of course, this has eroded the purchasing power of public sector employees. And now we see a new phenomenon, which is low pay within the public sector. And we can see that in a number of countries, well, first, I mean, the average wage in the public sector has been reduced below the average wage in the private sector. So that means that public sector employees are now at risk. And second, we can see that there's an increasing number of low-paid workers in the public sector. And we can see that in Hungary, for example, more than 50% of public sector employees with less than secondary education are considered as being working poor today. And we can see that there's also an increasing number of low-paid workers in Germany, in the Baltic states, and in a number of European countries. So this is a new phenomenon which is clearly showing a risk of sort of destitutions in the public sector. At the same time, we also have to mention the detrimental effect on women, because the public sector has traditionally been a source of employment for women, but not only a source of employment, also a source for better skilled and better paid positions. And also you traditionally have better working time arrangements and better work and family arrangements in the public sector which of course are good for women. So not only women have been affected in terms of employment, in terms of working conditions in the public sector, but also the cut of public public expenditure has been having an effect on women, generally speaking. The aim of public sector reforms, in fact, is to do more with less. But what we can see from all the studies we did in the European countries so far is that all those detrimental effects are leading to a sort of course, countries paying less, but also getting less out of the whole process. And it's true that if we have long-term effects on the efficiency of public sector services, then we may end by paying more for getting less. We can see that in a number of regions, public sector employees are representing an important source of demand, consumption. So what is going to happen if we dismantle the public sector? And then we also have to question ourselves in terms of, is it possible, for example, to have first pay and working conditions in the public sector converging towards those prevailing in the private sector? And second, could we have the same quality of services, for example, if we shift the provision of public services towards the private sector? The role of the public sector is part of the European social model. And I think for the ILO as well, it's very important that the public sector remains within the core of labour standards. And certainly the public sector should play a role in the future in terms of both social cohesion and economic growth.